Ever feel like you need a crash course in like how to raise a human being 2.0, Especially with all the internet and everything they're dealing with these days. Guiding teams today, it sometimes feels like, well, you're walking through a minefield.
Right.
That's why we're doing this deep dive, right? To really dissect this Tomorrow Leaders program. It basically claims to be like the ultimate guide to prepping teens for, well, anything and everything.
It's a bold claim, that's for sure. I have to admit, I was pretty skeptical at first,
Sure.
but the more we dig into it, the more intriguing it gets. It's not just about good grades. They're talking about like building resilience, purpose, leadership, the whole shebang.
Right. It's like they took all those self-help buzzwords
Right.
and just built a whole curriculum around them.
Yeah.
But here's what really got me interested. They're tackling stuff. Most programs they just like shy away from. DigitalDetox.ai. Navigating a quote-unquote post-truth world. That's not your average after-school special.
Exactly. And that's what's so refreshing, right? They're not just playing catch up. They're trying to stay ahead of the game, which is like essential in this day and age.
But it makes you wonder, can you really prepare for everything?
Yeah.
I mean, life, it has a way of throwing curveballs, even with the best laid plans.
Absolutely. And that's where their approach is kind of interesting, right? They've structured the program around 5, what they call tracks: who, you, we, me, and they.
Okay, now you got to break that down for me because it sounds like I don't know, like a cheesy boy band from the 90s. What's the Who track all about?
So the who track, it's all about understanding the individual, right? Like, who are these teenagers? They start off with personalized assessments, personality tests, performance evaluations, all that jazz. They really try to get a sense of each student's like strengths, weaknesses, the whole 9 yards.
So it's like they're tailoring the program,
Yeah.
creating a like custom-made suit rather than trying to fit everyone into the same, off-the-rack thing. Okay, so far so good. But what happens after the Who track? Where does the U track fit in?
So after they go through all the assessments in the Who track, right, each teen, they get paired up with like a personal mentor. And the U track is all about like one-on-one guidance, someone to help them, actually make sense of those assessments and navigate the program, all that.
Okay, but that's a lot of responsibility for one mentor. How do they, I don't know, how do they find these people? Are we talking like therapists, life coaches, career counselors? Like, who are these superheroes?
It's a valid question. I mean, the program, it does emphasize parental involvement, right? Like,
Right.
the parents get to have a say in choosing a mentor, so there's some, like, control there. But it does make you wonder about the whole, like, vetting process, the training. Like, are these mentors actually qualified to deal with, all the stuff teenagers go through these days?
Right, and it seems like they're really relying on these mentors to guide these teens through some pretty heavy stuff, honestly. So we've got Who, we've got You. What about this We track? Tell me more about that.
All right, so the We track, that's where they like shift gears, right? They move away from that individual focus and like dive into collaborative learning. They have these group sessions, they cover 6 different modules, and that's where honestly, that's where things get interesting. They tackle things like the impact of social media on like brain chemistry, navigating online relationships, even the whole ethical dilemmas of AI. Like, it's a lot.
Wow, okay, they're not pulling any punches, are they?
Yeah.
I mean, those are some big complex issues even for adults to wrap their heads around. So, how do they make that like engaging and relevant, right, for teenagers who are, let's be honest, glued to their phones half the time?
Right. That's the $1,000,000 question. They call it, get this, they call it gamification of learning, which,
Sounds a little gimmicky.
a little bit, right? But the idea is to make it like interactive. So think like discussions, debates, maybe even some friendly competition.
So instead of just like lecturing at them about, I don't know, the dangers of too much screen time, they're trying to create an experience that actually gets the point across.
Exactly. And that approach, it seems to be like woven throughout the entire program, which brings us to the Me track.
Okay, let's talk about Me.
So the Me track, they take things a step further and they really encourage the teens to like apply what they've learned, put it into practice.
So it's like rubber meets the road time.
Exactly. It's one thing to talk about these big ideas, right? But it's a whole other ball game to like actually put them into action.
So give me an example. What are we talking here?
So one example, they have this digital detox competition. It's one thing to, talk about the benefits of putting down your phone, right? But it's a whole other thing to actually do it. I'd be curious to see how they structure something like that.
Right. It's like a real life experiment in like self-control,
Yeah.
managing those digital distractions we were talking about earlier. Okay, I'm hooked. But what about the parents?
Mm.
Are they, like, just spectators in all of this?
That's where the they track comes in. It's the parental partnership aspect. They have workshops, progress reports, constant communication. Like, they really emphasize keeping the parents in the loop.
That makes a lot of sense because teenagers don't exist in a vacuum,
Yeah.
right? They need that support system at home. Okay, so we've got who, you, we, me, and they. It's a mouthful. What are your initial thoughts on this whole five-track system?
I mean, on paper, it's pretty impressive, right? They're clearly thinking about, like, all the different aspects of a teenager's life. We're talking self-awareness, personal growth, real-world skills, the whole mentorship piece, even involving the parents. But the real test is, does it actually work? Does it deliver?
Right, and how do you even begin to measure the success of something like this? I mean, is it just about, I don't know, acing their AI quiz or lasting a week without their phone? Like, what does it actually look like for a teenager to go through this program and come out, a changed person?
Those are the questions we need answers to, right? And to answer those questions, we really have to dive into the content of each module. We've got to go beyond the fancy names and really see what's going on under the hood.
Okay, so let's do it. Let's buckle up and get into the nitty-gritty of it. We'll start with Module 1 and get this. It's called Sun, Rain, and a Seed.
Catchy, right?
They're not wasting any time getting all philosophical on us, huh?
Not at all. And this is where things get interesting, especially considering what they're trying to achieve with this whole program, right? It seems like they're laying the groundwork for a meaningful life from the get-go. They're tackling these big existential questions, purpose, identity, even ethics right off the bat.
It makes you wonder, how do you make those kinds of topics, right? How do you make those resonate with teenagers who, let's be real, are probably more worried about, their next TikTok post than, like, the meaning of life?
Right. And that's where their approach gets interesting. So the first unit in this module is called the One and Only, and it really centers around this concept of servitude to Allah. They're starting with this spiritual foundation, which might seem a little unexpected.
It's a bold move right out of the gate.
It is, but it speaks to their emphasis on values and finding your place in something, bigger than yourself.
Okay, I see where they're going with this.
Right.
But, and I don't want to get too sidetracked here, but it does raise questions about inclusivity, right? Like, how do they handle that aspect of it?
That's a really important point to consider, right? It's one thing to introduce a specific faith-based perspective, but it's another thing entirely to create an environment where all the teens, right, regardless of their background, they feel, comfortable, respected. It's something we should definitely keep an eye on as we go through this.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've got the whole spiritual foundation thing going on, but
Yeah.
what about the more, I don't know, practical application of these big ideas?
Right. So that's where Unit 2 comes in. It's called the straight line.
Yeah.
They kind of shift gears a little bit here and delve into building a moral compass, focusing on concepts like gratitude, love, freedom, justice, responsibility, the whole 9 yards.
It's like they're trying to give them a framework, right, for
Yeah.
ethical decision making.
Yeah.
Which is a lot to tackle. I mean, how do they make sure that all this stuff doesn't just go in one ear and out the other with these kids?
So, from what I gather, they really try to emphasize the connection between actions and consequences. They encourage the teens to think about the impact of their choices, not just on themselves, but on others.
So it's not just about following the rules because someone told you to, right? It's about actually understanding the reasoning behind the rules.
Yeah.
And developing your own internal moral compass.
Exactly. And they don't stop there. They wrap up Module 1 with, get this, the message. It's a whole unit encouraging these teens to think about their legacy.
A legacy. I mean, that's a pretty heavy concept, even for, someone my age. How do you even begin to process that as a teenager?
Right. Well, they encourage them to think big picture. What do you want to be remembered for? What kind of impact do you want to have on the world? It's about planting those seeds of, purpose and contribution early on.
Okay, I have to admit, I'm impressed. They're not just throwing information at them, they're actually challenging them to think critically about who they are and what they want their life to stand for. But how does that land with the teens themselves? That's what I'm curious about.
Me too. I mean, it's one thing to have this, beautifully designed curriculum on paper, but it's another thing entirely to deliver it in a way that truly connects with teenagers.
Right, because teenagers can sniff out inauthenticity a mile away.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we've laid the groundwork here, right? Module 1 is about establishing that, spiritual foundation, building that moral compass, and then planting those seeds of purpose. It's ambitious, I'll give them that. But now I'm really curious about the how. Like, how do they take these big, lofty ideals and translate them into, actual practical skills and like real world action?
That is the question, and that's where Module 2 comes in, my friend. It's called The Mirror. Who am I?
Okay, the mirror. Who am I? That sounds intense.
Right. It's all about self-discovery, which makes sense given like the groundwork they laid in that first module. Before you can go out and, change the world, you have to understand yourself, right?
Okay, that's fair. But I mean, the mirror. Who am I? Are they going to have these kids staring into a mirror for like 3 weeks straight? What does that even look like?
Thankfully, no. But they do dive deep. I mean, they explore the physical, emotional, intellectual, and yeah, even the spiritual aspects of what makes us who we are.
Okay, so they're covering all the bases. But again, how do you make this appealing to teenagers? Like, this is a generation that's used to getting their information in like bite-sized chunks,
Mm.
you know?
Right, and I think they recognize that because from what we can gather, they use a variety of methods. So discussions, debates, they even explore different philosophical and religious perspectives on all these concepts.
So they're acknowledging that these teenagers are capable of engaging with complex ideas, but they're also meeting them where they are, right? There's using like different approaches to make it more, I don't know, stimulating and relevant.
Exactly. And they haven't forgotten about the practical stuff either. They also spend time talking about the importance of, sleep, exercise, nutrition. They recognize that, taking care of your physical well-being is like essential.
Right. You can't exactly expect someone, especially a teenager, to like ponder the mysteries of the universe if they're running on, 2 hours of sleep and a bag of chips.
Exactly.
Okay, so they're encouraging them to take care of their bodies, their minds. What about this whole like digital age we're living in? Because we hear so much about like the negative impact of, screens and technology on young people.
It's a huge concern, and they definitely don't sugarcoat it. They talk about how, the constant stimulation from social media, video games, all that, it can like rewire the brain and, make it harder to focus and find enjoyment in like everyday activities.
Right, it's like that instant gratification, right? It's
Yeah.
rewiring our brains to expect that all the time. So,
Yep.
do they offer any solutions or do they just like leave them with all the doom and gloom?
No, they definitely offer solutions. They talk about the importance of setting limits, creating like tech-free zones, even suggest activities that like, promote dopamine release in healthier ways.
Okay, so it's not about like demonizing technology altogether. It's about finding that balance.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And this whole emphasis on like empowering teens to make informed choices about their tech use, that seems to be a common thread throughout the program, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, that's huge because it's not realistic to think they're just going to like give up their phones and their video games completely, right?
Right.
Okay, so they're tackling the physical changes, the whole digital age dilemma, all the complexities that come with it. What's next on this journey of self-discovery?
Well, next up is chapter 3, and it's called The Mind's Quest. And this is where they really dive headfirst into like intellectual development. But they challenge that, that traditional idea that intelligence is just about, your grades and your test scores.
Yes, finally somebody said it. Tell me more.
They actually explore different types of intelligence, like critical thinking, creative thinking, analytical thinking. They even introduce them to the concept of like multiple intelligences.
Which is so important, right? Because we don't all learn the same way, and our strengths might not always be the ones that show up on a like standardized test.
Exactly. And they don't stop at just like identifying these strengths. They actually give the teens like practical tools. They teach them how to analyze information, solve problems, think outside the box, like essential life skills, really.
It's like they're preparing them not just for the classroom, but for, the real world.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered the body, the mind. What about matters of the heart?
Ah, yes. Well, that's where it gets really interesting. Chapter 4 is called The Heart's Call. And as you might imagine, they tackle relationships.
Oh boy, here we go.
Right. We're talking family dynamics, friendships even, gulp romantic relationships in the age of social media and like online dating.
Okay, now that's a minefield if I've ever seen one. Like, how do you even begin to navigate that with a group of teenagers?
From what we can tell, they emphasize the importance of like open communication, honesty, setting healthy boundaries and respecting the boundaries of others. They even address like the whole world of online relationships and the potential dangers that come with that.
It's like they're giving them like emotional intelligence 101, which honestly a lot of adults could use a refresher course on. Let's be real.
Right. And they wrap up module 2 with This is interesting. The spirit's thirst. So they're revisiting that whole spirituality aspect we talked about earlier, but this time they're delving into concepts of good and evil, angels and demons. Like, it gets pretty deep.
Okay, now this is where it could go either way, right?
Okay.
Are they preaching like a specific dogma here, or are they encouraging, critical thinking and allowing these teens to come to their own conclusions?
From what we can tell, they seem to strike a good balance. Like, they present these concepts, but they also really encourage the teens to, like, grapple with them independently, explore their own beliefs and values.
So it's less about telling them what to think and more about giving them the tools to figure it out for themselves.
Exactly. And that seems to be a recurring theme throughout the entire program, which is great to see.
It is. Okay, so by the end of Module 2, these teenagers have gone on quite the journey of self-discovery. They've explored, their physical selves, their emotional selves, intellectual, spiritual. It's a lot to unpack.
It really is.
And it's all in preparation for Module 3. Now, what do these teens have in store next?
Well, Module 3 is all about getting ready for what's next.
What could it be?
They call this one Packing for the Journey. And here they shift from self-discovery to skill building, which is a really interesting transition.
Well, we'll have to wait until next time to hear more about that journey. This is just part 1 of our 3-part deep dive into this Tomorrow Leaders program. Join us next time when we'll really dig into the skills they think these young people need to navigate the world. See you then.
It's interesting you use that word packing because they actually start Module 3 with a look at what teenagers bring to the table already.
Okay.
Like their strengths
Right.
and their, let's call them growth areas.
Right, so it's not all like doom and gloom. They're not just focusing on the negative.
No, not at all. They actually talk about, the creativity, the adaptability, how tech savvy they are, things that honestly often get overlooked.
Right.
But then they also address the, the challenges, like the impulsivity, the peer pressure,
yeah.
that tendency to think more short term.
Right.
So it's about acknowledging the full, spectrum of the teenage experience.
Right, so it's like they're saying, hey, this is what you're working with. This is like the raw material.
Yeah.
Now let's figure out how to use it to your advantage.
Exactly. And that's where this whole concept of growth mindset versus fixed mindset comes in, which they dedicate a whole chapter to.
Okay.
It's all about how our beliefs about ourselves,
Yeah.
whether we believe we can change and grow can either limit us or totally empower us.
Which is huge, right?
Yeah.
Especially for teenagers, because if you believe that, you're just stuck with a certain level of intelligence or talent, then why even try?
Right. And they actually give practical tips for cultivating a growth mindset. Things like, embracing challenges instead of shying away from them.
Okay.
Viewing mistakes as opportunities to learn.
Yes.
Persevering even when things get tough.
They're basically giving these kids a resilience toolkit.
Exactly.
I love it. Okay. What else is in this toolkit here? What else are they packing for this journey?
Well, they dedicate a whole chapter to, they call it the leader's core habits. And let me tell you, they don't mess around.
Okay.
They cover everything from practical skills like speed reading and time management to essential life skills like financial literacy, even journaling. It's a lot.
Wow. That's a lot. But I can see how it all ties back into that, that bigger picture of developing well-rounded leaders.
Right.
But I mean, are they expecting these teens to become experts in everything?
No, not necessarily, but they are exposing them to a wide range of tools, techniques,
Yes.
right? And encouraging them to kind of find what works for them, develop their own personal success system, so to speak.
Right. So it's like they're giving them a taste of everything, and then it's like, okay, now go out there and create your own recipe for success.
Exactly. And speaking of, preparing for the future, they have a whole chapter dedicated to, get this, artificial intelligence. The future is today.
Okay, now we're talking. Because AI is everywhere these days, and it's only going to become more prevalent in their lives.
Right.
So how do they even begin to tackle that with a group of teenagers?
Well, they break it down. They start with the basics, what AI is, how it works, the potential benefits, the risks.
Yeah.
And then they get into more specific applications. So we're talking self-driving cars, personalized medicine, even stuff that, directly affects their lives, like social media algorithms, facial
Okay.
recognition software, all that.
So they're making it relatable, right?
Yeah.
Showing them how it's already like playing a role in their world and how it might shape their future,
Exactly. And they don't shy away from the ethical questions either.
which are huge.
Oh, yeah, huge. They talk about like the potential for bias in algorithms, the impact on jobs, the importance of using this technology responsibly.
It's about making them like informed citizens, right, of this digital world, not just like passive consumers.
Exactly. And that whole approach, giving them the tools and the knowledge to really think critically about the world around them, that seems to be like a major theme of this whole program, which I think is fantastic.
It is. Okay, so we've got self-awareness, we've got resilience, we've got life skills, AI knowledge. What else could they possibly need for this journey?
Well, even with the best preparation, life, it throws curveballs, right?
Oh, yeah.
And that's where Module 4 comes in.
Okay, here we go.
They called this one Surviving During the Journey.
Ooh, I like it.
This one's all about giving them the tools to deal with those inevitable, challenges and setbacks.
So it's like the stuff happens module.
Exactly.
Okay, I have a feeling this one's going to be a bit of a roller coaster.
It is. It gets real, real fast. They jump right into dealing with stress, anxiety, anger, fear, all the heavy hitters.
Oh, yeah, the big ones.
Yeah.
But how do they even begin to approach that with teenagers? Because it's one thing to like, acknowledge that those emotions exist, but it's a whole other thing to actually give them the tools to deal with them in a like healthy way.
Right. And I think they do a really good job of it
Okay.
because they start by normalizing it.
That's-
They're like, hey, it's okay to feel stressed. It's okay to feel anxious. It's okay to feel angry.
Right.
These are all normal human emotions.
Right. It's not about like suppressing it. It's
Exactly.
about acknowledging it.
Exactly. And they even say, like bottling it up, it only makes things worse.
Right. Exactly. So it's about creating that safe space for teenagers to like actually talk about what they're going through without feeling like they're being judged or, that there's something wrong with them.
Exactly. And then they take it a step further and they actually give them like practical strategies, for managing those big emotions in a healthy way.
Okay. Like what?
So they talk about the importance of like exercise, sleep, mindfulness, social connection. They even introduce them to like relaxation techniques,
Okay.
like deep breathing, meditation, things like that.
So it's like they're giving them this whole toolkit of coping mechanisms to like draw on when they're feeling overwhelmed. And it's not about, just slapping a Band-Aid on it.
Right.
It's about building those like long-term skills.
Exactly. They're not promising like a magic cure-all. They're teaching these teens how to build resilience over time.
Which is so much more valuable in the long run.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so they're tackling like the emotional and mental aspects of, dealing with challenges. But what about the more, I don't know, practical logistical stuff?
Right. Well, they've got that covered too. That's the last part of Module 4. It's called Emergency Preparedness and Self-Care. And I know what you're thinking. They're not just talking about knowing the Heimlich maneuver.
Okay, because that's where my mind went.
Yeah.
So what are we talking about here?
They cover a lot of ground. So from like creating a support network, knowing how to like access resources to more, concrete skills like basic first aid, emergency preparedness, even things like online safety, like what to do if you're being cyberbullied, things like that.
Wow, it's like they're really giving them the tools to like advocate for themselves, right?
Oh, yeah.
And to take control of their own like safety and well-being.
Exactly. And they really emphasize that self-care, it's not selfish.
Right.
It's essential.
It's not indulgent. It's like how you show up for yourself and for others.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, Module 4, definitely an emotional roller coaster,
Hmm.
but incredibly insightful. They're covering some really like heavy topics, but they're doing it in a way that feels, I don't know, sensitive and empowering.
I agree. And ultimately hopeful.
Yes, they're not sugarcoating it, but they're not like leaving them with a sense of hopelessness either.
Exactly.
Okay, so after all that introspection, all that skill building, I'm ready for a change of pace. What's next?
Well, get ready to hop in the time machine because Module 5 is called, wait for it, the time machine.
Oh, I love it.
This one takes a step back and it looks at like the bigger picture, guiding them through the past, the present, and even the future.
Okay, so after all that, like deep diving into themselves, they're like zooming out and looking at the like grand scheme of things.
Exactly.
I like it. Where do they start?
Well, they start logically in the past, right?
Yeah.
Chapter 1 is called The Past, How We Got Here.
Okay.
And they explore like major historical events, but not in a like boring textbook way.
Right.
They focus on how those events have shaped, the world we live in today.
Right. So it's about understanding those cause and effect relationships and
Exactly.
recognizing that history is not just like, a bunch of dates and names in a textbook.
The story.
It's a story, right?
Yeah.
And it's still being written.
Exactly. And they encourage critical thinking, too, reminding them that, there are always multiple perspectives on historical events. So it's about developing a more, nuanced understanding of the
Which is
past.
so important
Hmm.
because you can't really understand the present if you don't understand the past, right?
Right. And that leads us to Chapter 2, the present. What is going on?
Ooh, here we go. This is where it gets real.
This is where they get real about the challenges, the big challenges facing the world today.
Okay, I'm bracing myself. What are we talking about here?
I mean, they cover a lot of ground, from climate change and environmental stuff
Okay.
to global health crises,
Right.
social inequality, even the impact of, all this technology we're talking about.
Right.
It's a lot to take in, but they approach it in a way that's informative, but also empowering.
Right, because it's one thing to lay out all the problems, but it's another thing to inspire these teens to actually be part of the solution, right?
Mhm. Exactly. They present the facts, they talk about the potential consequences, but then they also highlight solutions
Okay.
and encourage the teens to get involved.
So it's not about overwhelming them with doom and gloom.
No, no.
It's about showing them that they have agency,
Exactly.
that they have the power to actually shape the future.
And that leads perfectly into the final chapter of Module 5, which
Okay.
is the future. What shall we expect?
Okay, so from the past to the present, now we're looking ahead.
Looking ahead.
But how can you even begin to predict the future, right? Like, do they have a crystal ball hidden somewhere?
No, they're not claiming to be fortune tellers or anything. They look at data, they look at expert opinions, and they use forecasting techniques.
Right, so it's about extrapolating
Exactly.
from current trends. Okay, so what kind of trends are they zeroing in on?
Well, they talk a lot about emerging technologies, things like AI, biotechnology, renewable energy. And they talk about, both the potential benefits and the risks of these things. And they emphasize that, the future isn't set in stone.
Right.
The choices that we're making today
Yeah.
are going to shape the world of tomorrow.
That's a powerful message.
It is.
Okay, so we've traveled through time, we've explored the past, we've analyzed the present, we've contemplated the future. What's left? What's the grand finale of this whole program?
Well, the grand finale, Module 6, is all about taking everything they've learned and putting it into action.
Okay, I like it.
They call this one overflowing, returning the favor.
So it's about giving back.
Right, exactly. It's about taking everything they've gained from this program and using it to make a positive impact.
Okay, what's the first step?
Well, the first chapter is really interesting. It's called The Road to Excellence.
Hmm.
And they start by challenging teenagers to redefine what leadership even means. They debunk common myths about leadership and encourage the teens to see it, not as a position of power over others.
Right, it's not about being the boss.
Exactly.
Right, it's about serving others.
It's about serving others. It's about using your influence, whatever that may be, to make a positive difference. And they talk about qualities of a good leader, things like empathy,
Yes.
integrity, the ability to inspire others, to empower others.
Which are all the soft skills that we've been talking about that are so important.
They're essential.
Okay, I love all of this, but it's one thing to talk about leadership in theory, right?
Hmm.
But how do they actually get these teenagers to put it into practice?
That's where Chapter 2 comes in. They called this one The Dawn of the Adventure.
Okay.
And this is where they have the teens revisit their dream-building plans from way back in Module 1.
Oh, right.
Remember those big, hairy, audacious goals they set for themselves?
Yeah,
Well, they dust those off and they start developing concrete action steps
I love it.
to actually make them a reality.
Okay, so it's about taking those big dreams and turning them into manageable steps.
Exactly.
Because otherwise it's easy to get overwhelmed and just not do anything.
Exactly. And they offer workshops and stuff on things like project management, communication skills, teamwork.
Okay, so they're giving them the tools, the resources.
They encourage them to get involved in their community
Right.
through volunteering, internships, even starting their own initiatives.
So they're really encouraging them to be the change.
Yes.
put it all out there.
Put it into practice, and then they actually wrap up the whole program with like a final presentation
Oh, cool.
where the teens get to like showcase their projects and share what they've learned
That's awesome.
with their peers, their families, their mentors, everybody.
What a journey. I mean, they've gone from self-discovery to like skill building, from analyzing the past to contemplating the future, and then finally to taking action and like really trying to make a difference in the world.
It's pretty amazing, and it doesn't even end there because they actually offer like a level 2 program
Wow.
that delves even deeper into these topics and encourages the teens to like keep growing and keep learning long after the initial like 9 months are over.
So it's not just like a one and done. It's like it's a lifelong journey.
Exactly.
I love it. I mean, I'll be honest, at the beginning of this deep dive, I was a little skeptical,
Right.
but they've managed to create something really special here.
I agree.
It's comprehensive, it's thoughtfully structured, and it addresses a real need, but in a way that's like engaging and empowering.
And I think their emphasis on critical thinking,
Yeah.
ethical decision making, preparing these teenagers for a world that's like increasingly shaped by technology, it's really impressive.
And let's not forget about the parental involvement, right? That whole they track
Right.
with the workshops and the resources and the communication. It shows that they understand that, parents play a vital role in this whole process.
Yes.
But we've also raised some important questions throughout this deep dive.
Of course.
Like, how do they measure the program's like long-term impact? How do they ensure inclusivity? And how do they, stay current and adapt to the ever-changing like landscape of what it means to be a teenager today? Right?
Oh, those are the big questions.
They are. And unfortunately, we don't have all the answers.
Right.
Just based on, reading the program guide.
Right.
It'd be fascinating to like talk to some of the graduates of this program
Absolutely.
and see how this has like actually impacted their lives,
I agree.
So this is where we turn it over to you, our listeners.
Yes.
Have you or someone you know participated in this Tomorrow Leaders program? We want to hear from you. Share your experience with us. You can use the hashtag Tomorrow Leaders Deep Dive and tell us what you thought.
We really want to hear those different perspectives.
Because the success of any program like this, it's not just about like the design on paper, right?
It's about the execution.
It's about whether it actually delivers.
Exactly.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive on the Tomorrow Leaders program, we want to leave you with like one final thought.
Okay.
Whether or not this specific program is like your cup of tea, I think the questions that it raises are really important, right? Questions about how do we best support young people?
Absolutely.
How do we prepare them for an uncertain future?
How do we equip them to be those ethical leaders that the world so desperately needs?
Right. So as you go about your day, we encourage you to like think about the young people in your life.
Yes.
How can you support their growth?
Yeah.
How can you help them develop the skills and the knowledge and the values to thrive?
In a world that's constantly changing.
Exactly. Because it's not just about preparing them for the future, it's about empowering them to create it.
I love that.
And that is a wrap on our deep dive of the Tomorrow Leaders program. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive. Now, we spent a lot of time like really getting into the weeds of this Tomorrow Leaders program, but let's take a step back for a sec.
Yeah.
Big picture. What's your overall impression? Do you think they're onto something here, or is it like a case of overpromising and, under-delivering?
Honestly, based on what we've seen, I'm cautiously optimistic. I mean, they've obviously put a ton of thought into like the specific challenges teenagers are up against these days.
Right.
And their approach, it's refreshing. I mean, combining personal development with like ethical leadership and this global perspective, it's pretty unique.
Definitely not your average how to ace your SATs program.
No, not at all. They're aiming way higher than that. It's not just about like getting good grades. It's about like equipping these teens to actually go out and make a difference in the world,
Right. It's about significance, not just success.
Exactly. And I think that's really powerful. They're not just giving them information, they're challenging them to like think for themselves.
Right.
To figure out what they believe in.
Right. To find their own path.
Exactly. Which is, let's be honest, a lot to ask of a teenager.
It is. But we have raised some important questions along the way.
Of course.
Like, how do they actually know if this program is working long term? And how do they make sure it's inclusive? And I mean, how do they keep up with, how fast things are changing these days? Teenagers today, they're dealing with a whole different world than, even just a few years ago.
Right. It's a moving target.
Exactly. And those are the million-dollar questions.
They are.
And unfortunately, we can't really answer them just based on, what we've read here in the program guide.
Right, we'd need more information.
We would,
Hmm.
which is why we want to hear from you, our listeners. Have you or someone you know gone through this Tomorrow Leaders program? We would love to hear your firsthand experiences. You can share your thoughts with us on social media. Just use the hashtag Tomorrow Leaders Deep Dive. Tell us what you thought.
Yeah, we want to know, like, what worked, what didn't work, did it live up to the hype?
Right, because at the end of the day, the true measure of any program like this, it's not about, what looks good on paper. It's about the impact it has on the people who actually go through it.
100%.
So as we wrap up our deep dive on the Tomorrow Leaders program, we want to leave you with this thought. Whether or not this particular program is like the right fit for you or for the young people in your life,
Right.
the questions it raises about how we support and guide and empower the next generation, those are questions we should all be asking.
Absolutely.
The world needs compassionate, courageous, and creative leaders.
Now more than ever.
Now more than ever.
God.
So as you go about your day, we encourage you to think about the young people in your life. How can you support their growth? How can you help them cultivate the skills and the values to not just survive, but to thrive in this increasingly complex world?
It's a conversation worth having.
It is. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time for another one.
See you then.